And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. And Heather, what do we have on store today?
What should we do? Let's talk about the Supreme Court and what it's been up to. There's a lot this week. In vitro fertilization, what's happening? It's not great. A little preview across the country. Let's talk about Musk's bonus of almost $50 billion. And then let's discuss Father's Day.
I want to get to Father's Day as soon as we can.
No, there's too much good stuff to start.
Yeah. Well, what about the Supreme Court and the bump stock opinion?
So basically what happened was the court threw out in a decision led by Clarence Thomas a ban that would have stopped this addition to a gun and made it faster. It's my translation.
It's the right translation. I think the interesting thing to me here is this is not a Second Amendment right to gun case. This is another example of the Supreme Court trying to erode the legitimacy of administrative agencies who are tasked with the job of interpreting statutes. If administrative agencies in the federal government and the executive branch can't interpret statutes, then who's going to interpret the statutes? Nobody. And Thomas, in two opinions on this bump stock and also on the National Labor Relations Board and Starbucks, basically said the administrative agencies had gone beyond their official realm of power. The Supreme Court doesn't like administrative agencies. It would like instead, but either the president or Congress to take more responsibility. Honestly, Heather, this goes so much beyond an activist Supreme Court.
Right.
I mean, this is a Supreme Court that is out of control. That bump stock opinion was really in the face of what happened in Las Vegas. Everybody remembers what happened in Las Vegas. How many years ago? Just a few years ago.
A few years ago, 60, I think, people killed.
60 people
400
killed.
Injured. I mean, it was big.
Because the shooter used a gun stock. It's the only thing that we have done as a country to try to control guns. And we can't even do this with the Supreme Court and Clarence Thomas.
I know it. And then tell us more about, Starbucks. So again, you said administrative
this was the
maneuvers.
National Labor Relations Board. Essentially, the question that the Clarence Thomas addressed and his fellow conservatives, most of them, in fact, almost all of the court went along with him on this one, is that the administrative agencies, National Labor Relations Board, had overstepped its mark in basically deciding that, you could stop Starbucks from firing a worker for trying to form a union. Well, look, let's be very clear. In the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, it was the Congress, and we've relied on this since 1935. Congress made it a right of workers to try to form unions. And the fact is that Starbucks and other employers have been firing workers left and right who try to form unions. There's a chilling effect on forming unions. And if you don't say if courts cannot immediately enjoin, that is, stop this behavior, that is going to have it's going to make unionizing even more difficult than it already is.
I know. I feel like the Supreme Court, granted, everything's more in the news these days, or it is for me, and it's all in everyone's feeds, but they're flying at these levels where I feel like they're overstepping and they're needling in things that are too beneath them, and then they're in the weeds at the same time.
This is what I mean by an activist Supreme Court, a Supreme Court that basically doesn't care what the public thinks.
Right.
A Supreme Court that, right now it is sitting on the immunity case, the presidential immunity case that was, when the Justice Department asked it, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith asked it to take this case. It's been sitting on it for how long? For weeks and weeks and weeks. When you think how fast the court responded to other issues in terms of the election, can Donald Trump's name be on the ballot or be struck from the ballot?
Speedy.
And the irony here is that the court, by sitting on this case, is effectively deciding the case.
Right.
Because sitting on the case means the case is not going to be decided in time for the trial court to hold Trump accountable.
Yeah.
And so the American public is not going to know whether he is a convicted felon for this, in addition to the 34 counts
Right.
on the other issue of the hush money.
A non-decision is a
A
decision.
non-decision is a decision.
And
A
a
justice
signal.
delayed is justice denied.
Right?
And this court is the most irresponsible court I have seen in my lifetime.
Right.
Now, I used to argue before the Supreme Court. And in those days, you couldn't tell which members of the court were appointed by Republican or Democratic
Wow.
presidents. But now it's very clear.
So clear.
They're called Republican members of the court.
Hmm. I wonder if we can get some clips of you.
I hope not.
Yeah, that would be fun. I want to try and find those. Okay, the other case that was an interesting one this week was on mifepristone, right, which is an abortion pill. And SCOTUS teed it up knowing that it would be something they could agree on, this is my understanding, and appear somewhat moderate on an issue, a case related to reproductive rights.
Well, this gives,
Mention that.
they wanted to buy a little bit of political wiggle room so that because the fallout on the abortion decision, on the Dobbs decision, reversing Roe v. Wade is still huge.
Oh, we're seeing it.
And you have a very large number of women in this country who now cannot get an abortion. And even if, it's a big, big political issue, Heather.
It's a big issue.
It's larger than a lot of people assumed, because those people who are men, maybe,
Yeah.
because they didn't think about this being as large a political
Right.
issue, but it's hurting Republicans up and down the ticket. And obviously the Supreme Court is sensitive to politics.
Yeah. And then on IVF, we know that the Dems tried to push a bill that would have made it guaranteed. You could have access to IVF in any state. And of course, that was shot down.
Now, let's be clear about this, because
Yes.
IVF, in vitro fertilization,
Yes, sir.
means necessarily that some embryos that have been fertilized are going to have to be destroyed.
Yeah, that's science.
And that's science. That's
I
called
call
science.
that science and statistics.
Yes, but the act of destroying an embryo is something that is fertilized. If you believe that life begins with a fertilized embryo, it's against your religion. And if you are somebody who takes that very, very seriously, you don't see any line between
Right.
or wall between your religion and politics. And so this is becoming also a major political
Oh,
issue
major.
and a headache for the Republicans.
Great. We'll take it. And that started in Alabama, right? I feel like this whole thing more will be revealed, but we weren't surprised that it failed in the Senate. It's just unfortunate to watch it.
No, and I hope that the Democrats hold the Republicans accountable who voted against this or did not want to take a position, did not want to take a stand.
Let's get into that. So Rick Scott of Florida this is fascinating and so upsetting. And typical. So he said months ago, I am a grandfather of 7, and if they need IVF and choose to, then of course they should have access to it.
When did he say that?
A couple of weeks ago, and then screech, the record comes to a halt, and he now votes against this.
Do we have clips of him?
Please, can we watch just for a minute the hypocrisy?
My wife Ann and I have 2 daughters and 7 perfect grandkids. Each is a precious gift from God. But sometimes families need help. Millions of babies have come into this world through IVF, in vitro fertilization. In fact, our youngest daughter is receiving IVF treatments right now, hoping to expand her family. She and I both agree IVF must be protected. For our family, for every family. I'm Rick Scott, the grandpa who approved this message.
IVF must be protected.
The
says
lying
Rick
grandpa.
Scott, the lying grandpa. Hypocrisy.
Hippocratic.
Your name is Rick Scott.
Two-faced gramps.
So what's the second clip?
The second clip is the vote, basically. It's him doing a 180-degree turn.
Mr. Scott of Florida, no. Mr. Graham, no.
Mr. Scott of Florida, no. On
Grandpa, get back in your rocking chair.
The thing is that we've taken now, the norm is so taken for granted particularly after Trump. But these Trump Republicans, they will say one thing in an ad
Oh, yeah.
and a campaign ad.
That exists forever in front of eyeballs.
And then they will vote against the very position they took before.
But does it matter, Bob? I mean, the constituents aren't saying, they're like,
Well, people, I don't know whether it matters because people are so cynical about politics that they're now just getting used to it. I mean, Trump has been lying, since 2015, and those lies are about some very big and important issues. And obviously, there is a kind of atmosphere now in which a politician, particularly a Republican politician, could say whatever he or she wants to say about anything, and then not vote for that position or against that position, be completely inconsistent, be completely hypocritical, and it doesn't matter. They're not held accountable.
The latest example I know we were talking about was when Trump said he never led a chant that said "lock her up," and then you see so many clips of him doing exactly that. But it doesn't, is there ever a tipping point where we get enough of the lies that you say, okay, now that last one, it's like allergies. Allergies, it's like a bucket and you're not allergic to strawberries until the last drop and then you're allergic to strawberries?
Well, that's an interesting question. Is there a tipping point? Or is the public so cynical about politics and politicians in turn so cynical about the public's reaction that it doesn't matter? That we're living in a system in which politicians basically can get away with saying and doing just about anything.
It doesn't matter for some. I think what we have to hope and trust is that it matters for a lot of people, and it'll matter for enough people in certain elections.
Well, this is an important point. 40%, actually more than 40% of the people who are likely to vote are independents. They are not Republicans,
is
registered
that the biggest number
Republicans.
I don't remember the numbers being that high.
No, it's much
So
higher than it was last time around, last election. And so these independents, let's hope that they have a shred of independence. That they really are thinking for themselves.
Right.
I think that the registered Republicans are not, most of them.
Right.
They are Trumpists, Trumpers. Democrats are, I am a Democrat. You are. You don't have to declare your political party, Heather. My point is, though, Democrats believe in democracy. We believe that it is important for people to have some integrity when they go into politics. And I think that Trump Republicans basically don't believe that.
And through this roller coaster of lies that we're all, this pinball machine of lies that we're having to bounce around in, it seems like the two real tenets of their, I didn't mean if you could even call them that are coming forward of the Republican Party are, let's be against women's rights and reproductive rights, combined, and big tax cuts to corporations and individuals. We keep seeing these two themes so blatantly.
That's exactly right. That's what the Republican platform is. And Trump is, even though Trump takes credit for the Supreme Court's anti-abortion ruling, Trump is trying to thread the needle and say, well, all I've done is made up the states, and that's exactly what should happen. The states, people should be heard. And a lot of Republicans are also trying to wiggle around all of this. But it's the same issue with populism. Trump says, I'm a man of the people. Republicans say we are on the side of the working class. But what do? They are the strongest advocates for big tax cuts for the wealthy and for big corporations.
That's it. And this week on Wednesday, the Senate Budget Committee had a hearing, and people came in and said, let's look at what the tax cuts have done for average people and for companies and for CEOs. And where does that 2.7 trillion repurchasing power go? Into more shares.
Now, let's be clear. This is the Trump tax cut, the only major legislative accomplishment, quote unquote accomplishment, of the Trump administration, 2017. And it provided a huge windfall for very wealthy people and big corporations. Big corporations were supposed to use this, supposedly, this is what Trump said, a lot of Republicans said.
R&D, infrastructure, wages, God forbid.
And what did they use it for? They used it for buying back their shares of stock. And you buy back the shares of stock, all you accomplish is CEO pay goes
know.
up, and some very wealthy shareholders get even wealthier. You're not making the company more competitive.
Yeah.
You're not making America more competitive. Nothing is trickling down. And meanwhile,
But
consumers...
the companies are doing well, and we should reward them. Aren't they?
Please.
They deserve applause and stock. Right? I mean, that's what I feel like we keep hearing and hearing and hearing. In fact, you have been talking about CEO pay for eons.
120 years.
For
I started
120
in the late 19th century.
Right. When the CEO to average worker ratio was 2 to 1. It was that long ago. No, but really. So we have to talk about Musk right now. He had a windfall of all windfalls this week, and it is nauseating, the amount of money. Almost $50 billion just on paper that he will be getting essentially as a bonus, thanks to a big vote by shareholders. The majority said, fine, we'll give it to you. You've done great.
Heather, let's remember, first of all, to put this in context, $50 billion bonus. I mean, he's already the second or third wealthiest man in the world. Does he need a $50 billion bonus? This is in line. What's the amount the United States has provided in funding to Ukraine? Where you had this huge fight, this huge negotiation, is $60 billion. So the bonus to Elon Musk is in line with what we gave to Ukraine. It's in line with the GDP of some nations around the world. Does he need this? Obviously, he doesn't need this.
Need? I mean, who needs $50
But he
billion
wants to be the richest person in the world. He wants to have that kind of this is the Trump personality once again rearing its ugly head.
And it's control, and it's look at me, and it's I deserve it.
And it's not that the shareholders went along with this happily. I mean, what Trump did is what Musk did is he said, look, if you don't go along with this, I'm going to take my projects, my artificial intelligence, all my ideas, and I'm going to go to one of my other companies.
Oh, yeah. I know. They said, we need him, and look what he's done. I mean, they didn't highlight some of the things like the stock price going down, but don't worry, it'll go back up with them in charge. But so you were on something years ago, and it's so fun. And it's a different time. So it's Crossfire, and you were talking about CEO pay, and you were talking about it with various Republicans, and it's a heated debate because this used to happen on television. So it's fun to look back, not only on the outfits that people are wearing, and the beards, by the way, but let's look and see what you were saying about CEO pay 24 years ago.
The issue about CEO salary should not be part of this campaign. It's part of the corporation bashing and class warfare.
Let's compare CEO salaries to salaries of average working people. Now, in 1999, it's up to 475 times. Now, the minimum wage is $5.15 an hour. Don't you think, given that CEO pay is $6,000 an hour, we could raise the minimum wage from $5.15 to $6.15 next year? Why doesn't the National Association of Manufacturers get behind this
because it is bad social and economic policy. A year after they start at the present minimum wage, by all the statistics you know as well as I, they'll be well above it if they do well in that job.
But if
we
they get
must
a job,
not do that
Rudy, if they
to
get a
people
job,
struggling to get from welfare to work.
If they get a job at $5.15 an hour, that means that they are earning $10,712 a year. How does that get them out of poverty? Unlike the average CEO, who's earning this year $12 million, $10,712 doesn't go very far.
The rest of us in America have done that. We have worked our way out of it.
There's no reason why taxpayers ought to subsidize tax deductions of companies providing CEOs over $1 million.
Mr. Labor
And
Secretary,
boy, I thought that was
this
a good idea at the
latest
time. Still is a good
Al
idea.
Gore reinvention is the worst political pandering. It stokes up resentment and envy in the working class. My father was a steelworker. My mother was a hairdresser. You know what they taught me? If I work hard and take advantages of the opportunity of this, the greatest economy and democracy in the world, I would achieve the American dream. And I did. And I didn't do it by resenting anybody or attacking people who have been successful. This is the differences between these parties. I pray you run on this theme. It is so un-American.
Mary, there's nothing resentful about working for a decent pay, for a decent job, and a decent day's wage. And overworked and underpaid from the left, sitting in for Bill Press. I'm Robert Reich. Good night for Crossfire.
And from the Righteous Right, I'm Mary Madeline. Join us again tomorrow night for more Crossfire.
You know,
Wow.
well, honestly, I had not seen that clip, and I didn't even remember that particular
You were
debate.
heated.
But I was,
Liked it.
well, I was, and I do get angry about this stuff because it is so obvious, and it was obvious then that we were heading into very dangerous terrain. Workers who were not getting raises, who were, the minimum wage was at rock bottom. It had not been raised in years. It still hasn't been raised in years. And you have CEOs now getting 530 times the average worker. And the resentment, it is resentment. And what do they do when people feel powerless and they feel angry and feel anxious about their jobs? Well, ultimately, Heather,
Yeah.
they go and join up with a kind of strongman who promises them the world, even though he secretly is giving tax cuts to the richest people in America and the big corporations that are shafting them.
Yeah.
This has been going on for 24 years. That clip angers me because I've been saying the goddamn same thing for 24 years.
No, but some people have been listening. Also, it's so this argument of, self-righteous bootstraps. Look at me. I mean, you're given the opportunity, and if you take it, you're better than your parents and you're better than everyone else.
And also the notion that if you complain, you're just you're into resentment.
Yeah.
I mean, hello.
Yeah. And going from $5 to $6, I mean, you want to wreck the entire economy?
I mean, these are the same people. I'm talking about the Republicans now who have been bashing unions. Unions, when 24 years ago, you had about 20% of the American workforce was unionized. Now we're down to 12%, and in the private sector, we're down to 6%.
Corporations could have their way.
Yes,
it'd be 0%.
The average working person has no power.
I know.
People are getting laid off. These mass layoffs going on all over the country right now.
Yeah.
And top executives and corporations have record amounts of money.
Yeah.
They are responsible primarily for keeping prices up so that their profits keep on coming in.
Yep.
And the average consumer says, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. Look at what's happening to gas prices and food prices and energy prices and my rent. And they blame Biden.
I know. Well, I think they blame the status quo. They blame Biden for, some of their feelings for Gaza. And it's who the incumbent. It's who, it's just, I'm sick of that. I'm sick of the present, so I'm sick of you.
Thank you.
No, I was looking up that way. But so what about, you often talk about the Business Roundtable.
Well, the Business Roundtable, you have to
to?
understand, they are a very powerful lobbying group in Washington because there are more than 102, 103 when I last looked, CEOs of the biggest corporations in America belong to this organization. And when the Business Roundtable speaks, members of Congress listen because there's a lot of campaign cash that goes with that. And they made an announcement last week that they were going to provide a huge amount of campaign cash to back an extension of the Trump tax cuts of 2017. Now, they were behind the first tax cuts. So what that essentially means is that all of these CEOs who, after January 6, 2021, said, oh, we are not going to support Trump. We're not. Now they've come 180 degrees. They're all going to support Trump now. They're putting a lot of big money into this campaign because they want a tax cut for themselves and also for their corporations.
Yeah.
And they're willing to sell democracy down the drain because of it.
Yep, it's true. You've talked about the cycles of what happens from these tax cuts and what it means for the rich and what it means for debt. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's a vicious cycle in the sense that when these big corporations and the very wealthy get these tax cuts, what they do is and we've seen this, in fact, we've talked about it just a few minutes ago, they take the money and they put it into stock buybacks. They buy back their shares of stock, big corporations. And that artificially raises the level of stocks. That increases CEO pay because more and more CEO pay is in the form of shares of stock. And at the same time, it expands the deficit and the debt of the United States, which means we all have to go more into debt. And that means we have to owe bondholders of that debt more and more of our tax money. Who are the bondholders? Hello, the bondholders are largely wealthy Americans. So you see, the wealthy
I know.
who are demanding, many of whom are demanding tax cuts,
Yeah.
get a twofer. They get the tax cut, and then they also get the big interest payments on the bonds
Yeah.
that they have to, are necessary to finance the United States government.
It really is.
It's a scam.
It's a scam, and I want you to do one of your drawings on this. I don't know. I'm picturing you draw. I don't draw. Pipes and flowing, and some pipes with nothing left in them going in certain directions, and just
It's a siphon.
Yeah.
It's taking quietly taking money away from average working people and putting money up with
Yeah.
the stratosphere, up with the very,
Right.
very rich.
And the buckets in the stratosphere are the stock market and the bonds and the banks.
And Heather, why? You answer this question for me. Why
Please.
aren't the Democrats talking more about this? Why is this not an era of populist economics in which the Democrats say, look what's happening.
I
Look
know.
what is actually, look what they're doing with the tax cuts. Look at the consequence. Look at the CEO pay. Look at corporate profits. Look at the markups.
Right.
Look at the prices staying very, very high. This is all shafting average working people.
Right. Well, my pessimistic side says they don't want to do it because they have big money in their pockets. My pessimistically optimistic side says that some people are doing this more and more.
Yeah, I think some people are.
And so, I mean, we know Bernie Sanders. Hello, talk about.
But Bernie
populist messaging.
Sanders, also Sherrod Brown,
Yep.
also Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. We have, and they're all doing well in their
Right.
various elections and various
And a
politics.
lot of young people who are these influencers, these micro influencers. I mean, you're seeing it bubble up. I mean, I'm biased because I kind of am in digital media, but more people are talking about these issues than I've ever seen. And I would say they're describing them in different ways and in ways that they try and get into people's heads and feeds and hearts. And so I have a little bit of hope around a messaging movement. Is it going as fast as we'd like? No.
It's less than 5 months
I know.
until the election of 2024. Less than 5 months before our democracy really is on the line.
I know.
Is it going as fast as it should go? No.
But also, so not only that, but we can't just think about that. It's compared to what? It's compared to the Republicans' messaging, which is, bonkers. But also, there's white Christian nationalism. They're picking these threads, and it's really working. That reminds me that we didn't talk about Alito when we were talking about the Supreme Court, because
Talk about white Christian nationalism.
Seriously.
I mean, Alito is the justice best representing white Christian nationalism
I know.
on the Supreme
But if your
Court.
world is upside down, then I guess his flag is right side up. Is that his wife's flag? Forgive me, his wife's flag.
I mean, it's not
But
only the flags, but also he was picked up on tape,
Yeah.
saying that yes, it is essentially a war, and either they are going to win or we win.
Oh, it was horrendous.
And this is a Christian nation, and I mean,
A Supreme Court justice saying this. Now we do have to flag that it was a journalistic plant or someone who was recording the tapes.
I'm not in
right?
favor of entrapment.
No, exactly.
But for a Supreme Court justice to be so to be so ideological and so
I know.
religiously open about that ideology and how that ideology affects
scary.
him, and so politically partisan, putting up the flags, blaming his wife.
I know.
I mean, this is and again, Alito is not even one of the Trump appointees.
That's
You've
it,
got
yeah.
You've got Clarence Thomas and
Right,
Alito
those two.
already there,
Right, and then the other three.
You've got the other three.
No, it's not good. Yeah, caught on tape. What kind of originalist is that? Where's the stool pigeon?
Yeah.
How are my Alito jokes today?
Well,
Are they hitting?
I mean, Samuel Alito, if you read, and I'm not suggesting you do, but if you can't get to
Sounds
if you
like
can't get to
you're
sleep
suggesting it.
some night, and you really, really don't want to take Sominex or any other kind of artificial, read the Dobbs decision
Ooh.
that Alito
Yeah.
wrote, because it is absolutely, transparently bullshit. There's nothing in it. There's nothing in it. It goes on for pages and pages, 30 pages. There are 69 footnotes, and he says nothing.
Ooh, I'm going to skim it and report back.
But here's the thing. This is, remember, the decision that overturns a Supreme Court precedent.
Yeah.
And
it's fluffy. I mean,
it's empty. It's absolutely empty. I think that Alito is probably the worst justice on the current Supreme Court, and that's saying a lot.
it really is.
Yeah.
But that might change, because who knows?
Well, I mean, Clarence Thomas is.
He's been on more jets. Did you see that?
I saw more jets and more money is coming into him.
No, not reported. Trump's birthday was this week. We don't need to talk about that,
Trump's birthday.
do we?
He's old.
Oh.
He is old. Do you know that he is so old that he was in the same high school? If he and Joe Biden were at the same high school together,
I know.
they'd be in the same high
So
school
good. AOC said
at the
that.
same time.
Oh, it's fabulous. I love that phrasing. So can we talk about the Fed and interest rates and inflation, please? We can't not.
I have to adjust my head
Didn't know what-
into the interest rate.
Yeah, is it,
Well,
how can we help you? Jerome Powell.
here's the way of here's the
Perhaps.
segue. Here's
Yeah.
the segue. We were talking a moment ago about how average working people are being screwed by these Republicans and by this economy. Another way they are being shafted is by the Fed, because the Fed is keeping interest rates high.
Mhm.
Now, when it keeps interest rates high, who is drafted into the fight against inflation? Not wealthy people, not even middle-class people. Who is it? It's poor people they've got bank loans, they've got credit card fees they have to pay,
Yeah.
they have auto loans, they've got, indirectly they're paying mortgages. If
Mhm.
they don't own their houses, they're still paying mortgages in terms of their rents.
Yep.
So it's the poor who actually have to pay these high interest rates that are put into effect in order to slow the economy down
Right.
to avoid inflation.
Right.
When the major culprit is the big corporations.
And inflation, it was down.
And inflation is also down. It's down from, 2002, it was about 12%. It's down to about 3% now. That's a huge
Huge.
improvement. But, and I'm not the kind of person that really follows the polls very carefully because I don't believe in polls. But when all of the polls say the same thing, Heather, I begin to believe them. And all of the polls are saying that the number one issue for people is the economy, and the number one issue in the economy is the cost of living. And so people still are saying, I can't afford it. I can't
No.
afford it.
And I'm angry that I can't afford
And I'm
it.
angry. And who am I blaming?
Whoever's in front of me that I can.
Whoever is in power.
Yep.
And I believe, most voters believe that Joe Biden
Right. Hasn't done
can
enough.
do something about
Yep.
inflation, has not
Yep.
done enough.
So what's the Fed going to do?
Jerome Powell is pretty clear. They're going to keep interest rates high until inflation gets down from 3% to 2%.
Is this going to happen before November?
No. Well, they may
wonder.
start cutting interest rates before November, but it's not going to have.
Right.
It's not going to goose the economy before November. It's not going to help people with the cost of living.
Right. Okay.
I wish this could be a happier
Well, we can
Klatch.
Let's talk about Father's Day. That's tomorrow.
Father's Day.
I'm
yes.
not a father, but you are.
I am. Best thing I ever did
Oh.
in my life.
Which one? Oh.
Both.
Okay.
Both
Oh,
of-
good
I've
answer.
got two boys, and I love them both so dearly that I be careful I don't tear up.
Oh, I want you to. Not because I want you to, because I love that.
I was thinking about this. Joe Biden and Hunter Biden,
Oof.
and what Joe Biden must be going through in terms of he lost one son, he lost a daughter, but he loves his son, and
And addiction is a very specific
it's
disease that he's working with.
it must be so painful. for Joe Biden. But I love my sons, and I love being a father, and I miss my dad.
Oh, I bet you do.
I do.
I bet. Wasn't he, when he passed away at 100 and what?
He 2 weeks before his 102nd birthday.
Bob. And he was on
And-
the dance floor a week before?
And he was he danced at his 100th birthday.
I
He loved dancing. And he danced with his 96-year-old sister at his 100th birthday. But I miss him. I miss speaking. I talk to him all the time.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
How about your father?
My father, I talk to him. I'd miss him less, but I'll miss him one day probably. No, my dad is fabulous. I sent him a book on D-Day for Father's Day.
Dad's Day.
Yeah, for the D-Day, on D-Day. And then, of course, my husband is the father to my child. So something will happen this week. This is the great news. My husband doesn't listen to this Klatch ever. So I can tell you what I'm getting him. Because
Yes. What are you
he
getting?
won't listen
Heather,
before
what are you
tomorrow.
getting your husband?
So we have this fabulous neighbor across the street who does patent drawings, which is a very specific kind of artistry and very technical, and they're phenomenal, and he's hilarious. But he also does oil paintings, and he offered to do an oil painting of our dog, and it is so fantastic and photorealist. And it is glorious, and I can't wait to give it to him because he didn't give me much for Mother's Day. So then it just is so fun to be like,
Fathers and
"Look at
dogs.
this."
That's an
It is. It's a
interesting
thing. Yeah.
That's
So
nice.
that's the
and it's
plan.
nice of your dog also to think of your.
Well, I sent a picture,
husband.
but yeah, no, it was sweet. Anyway, that's that. So celebration.
Anyway,
Yes,
happy
Father's Day's a funny
Father's
one.
Day. Happy Father's Day,
I mean,
Heather.
I don't deserve it, but you're welcome.
Well, it's nice. And happy Father's Day, all of
All
you
the
fathers
fathers.
out there, and everybody who knows a father and has
Yeah.
a father, or was a father, or had a father. Happy Father's Day to you as well, and keep fighting. I mean, I'm thinking back on that tape we both looked at of me 24 years ago, yelling at Mary Madeline and the head of the National Association of Manufacturers, and damn it, I still feel the same way.
Good. We need you.
Keep going. See you next week.